The moment I stepped through the glass doors of ember and oak, I felt the temperature in the room drop by 10 degrees, not from the February air I had just walked in from the collective shock of 200 people who had absolutely no idea I was coming. My husband was standing at the far end of the restaurant, elevated on a small wooden stage that had been built specifically for tonight. He was wearing the charcoal blazer I had picked out for him at Nordstrom 3 months ago, holding a crystal whiskey glass high above his head, mid-toast. His mother was seated at the long head table directly beneath him, draped in an emerald green dress, looking like a woman who had personally built the place with her own hands. Amber was standing beside her, one hand resting on the edge of the marble bar, wearing a white satin blouse that made her look deliberately bridal. My husband saw me first. The glass in his hand stayed frozen in the air. The easy, rehearsed grin he had been wearing slid off his face so fast I almost heard it hit the floor. For a single, satisfying second, he looked exactly like a man who had been caught doing precisely what he was doing. Then he handed his glass to someone nearby and stepped down from the stage. I did not wait for him to reach me. I turned slightly and nodded to the two men standing directly behind me. They were not valet attendants. They were not friends of mine. They were process servers from Hartwell and Associates, and they were each carrying a sealed legal envelope stamped with the seal of the Davidson County Civil Court. My husband stopped walking. He looked at the men. He looked at me. His jaw moved, but no sound came out. I had imagined this moment for 11 months. I had practiced staying calm in my car at 2 a.m. while my husband slept soundly beside me, completely unaware that I had spent the previous 3 hours sitting in a dark parking lot outside my attorney's office finalizing paperwork. I had practiced not crying, not shaking, not lowering my voice the way I always did when he looked at me like I was being unreasonable. I was not lowering anything tonight. "Marcus," I said, keeping my voice at a normal conversational level, which in a room that had gone this quiet carried perfectly to every corner. "I heard about the opening. Congratulations." His mother stood up from the head table. She was a tall woman with the kind of effortless poise that came from decades of believing she was the most important person in any room she entered. She crossed the floor in my direction with her chin lifted and her heels clicking against the custom white oak flooring that I had personally selected from a reclaimed lumber company in East Tennessee. "This is a private event," she said, stopping a few feet from me. Her voice was pleasant, but her eyes were doing something else entirely. "You were not invited, and I think you know why." I smiled at her. It was the same smile I had given her at Christmas dinner 8 months ago, right before she told the table that I had never truly understood my husband's creative vision. The same smile I had given her at my own wedding rehearsal dinner when she rearranged the seating chart without telling me. "I do know why," I said, "and I want you to know that I completely understand." She blinked. She had not expected agreement. She was already loading the next sentence, and I had just pulled the ammunition out of it. I turned back to my husband. He had recovered enough to start moving again, crossing the room toward me with his shoulders squared, playing the part of a man who had this under control. "You need to leave," he said quietly, the way he always talked to me when other people were watching. His eyes were doing their version of a warning, the version I used to instinctively obey. "We can talk about whatever this is tomorrow. Tonight is important to me." I let him finish. Then I reached into my coat and pulled out a single document, folded in thirds, and held it out to him. He did not take it. One of the process servers stepped forward and placed it directly in his hand. "That is a notice of enforcement of secured creditor rights," I said clearly, so the people closest to us could hear every word. "Specifically, it is the formal initiation of a UCC Article 9 lien foreclosure on all business assets, inventory, and fixtures currently located at this address. The total outstanding principal is $480,000. The lien has been in place since the day this restaurant opened its first account." My husband stared at the paper. His lips moved slightly as he read. I watched the moment the words reached his brain. It was like watching a circuit breaker trip. "What lien?" he said. He did not say it loudly. He said it the way people say things when they are hoping they misread something. "You have been in default for 60 days, Marcus," I said. "You missed the first 2 payments on the promissory note you signed. My attorney sent certified notices to the business address and to your personal email. You did not respond to either of them." His mother walked over and snatched the document out of his hand before he could react. She scanned it rapidly, her reading glasses appearing from somewhere inside her handbag, her expression shifting from confused to furious in about 4 seconds. "This is your wife's name," she said. She held the paper up as though it were evidence at a crime scene. "She is listed as the secured creditor. Marcus, what is this?" He could not answer her. He was looking at me with an expression I had never seen on his face before. It was not anger. It was not contempt. It was the specific look of a person realizing that the ground they were standing on had never actually belonged to them. I should explain something, because the story of tonight did not start tonight. It started 3 years ago in a cramped 2-bedroom apartment in East Nashville, when my husband sat across from me at our kitchen table with a folder full of napkin sketches and told me he had a vision. He wanted to open a restaurant, not just a restaurant, a destination, farm to table, locally sourced, wood-fired everything, the kind of place that ended up in food and wine and had a 6-month wait list. He had the concept. He had the passion. What he did not have was capital. And what I had, from 10 years of working as a senior acquisitions analyst at a commercial real estate investment firm, was a great deal of it. I believed in him. I want to say that clearly, because what comes next is not a story about a woman who never loved her husband. I loved him completely. I withdrew $480,000 from my personal investment portfolio, and I structured the loan myself, professionally and properly, with a signed promissory note and a UCC financing statement filed with the state of Tennessee. My attorney advised me to do that way. I thought it was excessive. I filed the paperwork, and then I forgot about it the way you forget about a fire extinguisher on the wall, because you cannot imagine a situation where you will actually need it. For 18 months, I helped him build the thing. I researched vendors. I negotiated the commercial lease. I flew to Vermont with him to visit a dairy farm he wanted to source from. I sat in on every single design meeting, and I was the one who found the reclaimed wood flooring company, the one who called in a favor from a colleague to get them a feature in a local lifestyle magazine before they even opened. I did all of this while working 60-hour weeks at my own job. The restaurant opened on a Thursday in October. I was not there. I was in a hospital room in Vanderbilt Medical Center because I had been admitted 2 days earlier with acute appendicitis. My husband visited once. He stayed for 40 minutes. He told me the opening had gone well. He sent me a photo of the full dining room from his phone. I told him I was proud of him and meant it. Lying in a hospital bed connected to an IV drip. He was already seeing Amber by then. I did not know that yet. I would not find out for another 3 weeks, when I came home early from a work trip and found her sitting at my kitchen table drinking coffee from one of our wedding gift mugs, wearing one of his flannels. With the comfortable body language of a woman who had been in that kitchen many times before, she stood up fast. He came in from the hallway even faster. What followed was the kind of conversation you spend the rest of your life wishing you could unhear. He did not end it. He said he needed time to figure out his feelings. I gave him 60 days, moved into a short-term rental, and hired an attorney named Claire Okafor, who had the energy of someone who genuinely enjoyed going to war. Claire was the one who found the text thread, not the texts between my husband and Amber, though those were devastating enough. The texts between my husband and his mother, going back to the month before the restaurant opened, in which they discussed my role in the business going forward, and whether I was, quote, the right kind of partner for this phase of his life. His mother had apparently decided I was not. She had told him that Ember and Oak needed to project a certain image, that the restaurant world was built on personalities and storytelling, and that a wife who worked in commercial real estate and preferred spreadsheets to dinner parties was not the story they were trying to tell. She suggested, warmly and at length, that he might want to consider a clean break before the brand got too established. She mentioned Amber by name 3 separate times. I read those texts sitting in Claire's conference room on a Tuesday afternoon in November. I read them twice. Then I folded my hands in my lap and I said something that apparently surprised Claire because she set down her pen and looked at me. I said, "I want to wait." She asked me what I was waiting for. I told her I was waiting for the grand opening party. Every successful restaurant has 2 openings. The soft opening, which is quiet, and the grand opening, which is everything. The party, the press, the investors. The moment the owner stands up in the room they built and tells the story of how they got there. My husband had been planning his for 6 months. He had sent out engraved invitations. He had hired a photographer. He had booked a jazz quartet. He had not sent me an invitation. I found out about it through a mutual friend who assumed I knew. Claire spent those 3 months turning my fire extinguisher into a flamethrower. So there I was, standing in the middle of Ember and Oak on a Friday evening in February, with 200 guests watching, and my mother-in-law holding a court document in her manicured hands. "You cannot do this," she said. Her voice had lost its pleasantness entirely. "You are doing this on purpose. You are trying to humiliate my son in front of his investors." I looked past her at the 4 people seated near the window at a high-top table. 2 men in blazers and a woman in a structured coat who had the very specific posture of someone who evaluated risk for a living. My husband had spent the last 3 months courting a restaurant group out of Atlanta that was looking to acquire anchor concepts in secondary markets. They were his exit strategy, his big play. He had told my divorce attorney he expected the acquisition offer to come in somewhere around $2 million. I watched their faces. They had stopped talking among themselves. The woman in the structured coat had set down her drink. Marcus pushed past his mother and grabbed my arm. He did not grab it hard. He grabbed it the way he always did when he was trying to steer me somewhere private to continue the argument where no one could witness it. It was a habit I had accommodated for 4 years. I stepped back cleanly out of his reach. "I would prefer you not touch me," I said. "My attorney has advised against any physical contact during this process." He dropped his hand. He looked at the process servers again. He looked at the room. "Listen," he said, his voice dropping low and urgent, switching into the register he used when he was trying to manage me. "Whatever Claire has told you, this is not the way. You can dispute the loan terms in mediation. You do not have to do this here. You are going to ruin everything I built." I let him finish. It was a habit I was also working on breaking. "What you built," I said, "was built with $480,000 of my money, on a lease I negotiated, in a space I designed. I do not think the word I am looking for is dispute." I nodded again to the process servers. They moved to the bar. The second envelope was handed to the bartender, who looked at it like it might bite him, and then looked at my husband. "That is the notice for the secondary lien on the bar inventory and all smallwares," I said. "Every bottle, every piece of custom glassware, every plate in the kitchen. All of it was purchased as collateral against the original loan per the security agreement your husband signed on page 14. "He signed a security agreement?" his mother said. She was looking at her son now, not at me. "Marcus, did you read what you signed?" He had not read what he signed. I knew this because I had been the one who handed him the documents, and I had watched him flip to the signature page with the same careless speed he used to sign birthday cards. Amber appeared at his side. She had made her way across the room quietly, which told me she had been watching from the moment I walked in. She was prettier than I had let myself think about during the months when I was trying to stay focused. She was also younger, and she had the very specific energy of someone who had been told, repeatedly, that she was the reason good things were happening. She put her hand on my husband's arm and looked at me with an expression that was trying very hard to be compassionate. "This is clearly a painful situation for everyone," she said. "But this is not the place. There are people here who have traveled to celebrate something real. Can we please just take this outside?" I looked at her for a moment. Long enough to be respectful, and not long enough to be unkind. "I appreciate that," I said. "I really do. But I actually have one more thing to address before anyone goes anywhere." I opened my bag and removed the last document. It was longer than the others, tabbed at multiple points with colored flags, and I had read it so many times in the past 2 months that I could have recited entire paragraphs from memory. When my husband signed the original promissory note 3 years ago, he listed the primary business entity as Ember Oak Hospitality LLC. What he did not disclose to his investors, to his accountant, or apparently to himself, is that Ember Oak Hospitality LLC is a wholly owned subsidiary of a holding company called Ridgeline Creative Properties. He signed the operating agreement without reading it the same way he signed everything else. I paused. Across the room, the woman from the Atlanta restaurant group had picked up her phone and was typing something. "Ridgeline Creative Properties is registered in Tennessee," I continued. "The sole managing member of Ridgeline Creative Properties is me." The room was completely silent. Not the polite, attentive silence of people listening to a toast. The thick, airless silence of people absorbing information that was actively rearranging their understanding of the situation. My husband turned so pale that the color change was visible from across the bar. "That means," I said, keeping my voice even and clear, "that I do not merely hold a lien on this business. I am the parent company. Every decision made under this roof, every contract signed, every vendor agreement, every lease renewal, required my authorization as managing member. The operating agreement is explicit. My husband has been running this restaurant for 14 months without a single required authorization. He is in material breach of the governing documents on approximately 40 separate counts." "That cannot be right," his mother whispered. She was not talking to me. She was talking to the air in front of her face. Claire appeared at my left shoulder. She had been waiting near the entrance, and now she walked in with her briefcase and the calm, purposeful energy of a woman who had been looking forward to this particular evening for quite some time. She addressed the room directly. "Ember Oak Hospitality LLC is subject to immediate dissolution proceedings initiated by the managing member," she announced. "All third-party negotiations, acquisition discussions, and investor presentations conducted in the past 90 days are null and void, as they were undertaken without authorization from the parent company. If any party in this room has received a formal offer or letter of intent regarding acquisition of this concept, that document is legally unenforceable." The woman from the Atlanta group stood up. The two men with her were already putting on their coats. She looked at my husband across the room. "I am sorry, Marcus," she said. Her voice was not unkind. "This is not something our group can be involved in." He took a step toward her. He was doing that thing he always did when things started slipping, reaching for the room, trying to hold it with the force of his personality the way he had charmed his way out of every other difficult moment in his life. "Jennifer, please," he said. "We have been in conversations for 3 months. You know what this place is worth. You know what the brand is worth. This is a domestic dispute being weaponized in a business setting." She paused at the edge of the room. She looked at him steadily. A 48-year-old woman who had built 5 successful restaurant groups from the ground up looked at my husband with the expression of someone doing a final calculation. "What I know," she said, "is that a business with disputed ownership and undisclosed corporate structure is a liability I cannot take to my partners. Call us when the legal situation is resolved." She walked out. Her colleagues followed. The heavy front door swung shut behind them with a sound that seemed much louder than it should have. My husband stood in the center of the restaurant he had built. The jazz quartet had stopped playing somewhere in the last 5 minutes. The guests were standing in small clusters, some of them filming, some of them pretending to look at their phones while clearly listening to everything. The bartender was holding a dish towel and looking at the ceiling. Amber stepped forward. I had been wondering when she would. She did not go to my husband. She went to his mother. She did not keep her voice down. "Did you know about any of this?" she asked. Her tone was not the warm, supportive one she had been performing all evening. It was tight and controlled in the way of someone who was very quickly reorganizing their priorities. "When he told me about the restaurant, he said his wife had given him the money as a gift. A marital gift. He said there were no strings." His mother looked at her. There was no tenderness in it. "I do not see how that is my concern," she said. "It is your concern," Amber said, "because you were the one who convinced him to move forward with tonight as a show of confidence to the investors. He told me that. You said showing up, moving forward, presenting strength was how he would get the deal done. He said you told him his wife was just making noise and did not have the legal standing to stop anything." She paused. "He leveraged a $250,000 line of credit against this restaurant last month to cover operating costs. He put your name as the secondary guarantor because his credit was already stretched. Did you know that?" His mother went very still. "He what?" she said. "He needed the liquidity," Amber said. "He said you had agreed to it. He said it was temporary, just until the acquisition came through." "I never agreed to that," his mother said. Her voice had lost all its architecture. It came out flat and thin. "Marcus, look at me. Did you put my name on a credit line without telling me?" My husband could not seem to locate a response. He was standing between the woman he had left his marriage for and the mother who had encouraged him to do it, and both of them were looking at him with an expression that had nothing left in it. I thought about the 4 years I had spent in that same position, waiting for him to find words, making myself smaller so there was more room for his explanations. I did not feel sorry for him. That surprised me a little. I had expected to feel something adjacent to it. What I felt instead was a clean, quiet clarity, like the first hour of morning in a city before the traffic starts. Claire stepped up beside me and spoke quietly. The preliminary injunction has been filed with the court. The restaurant is formally frozen, pending dissolution proceedings. No assets may be transferred, sold, or relocated. I nodded. One of my husband's investors, a local hospitality group partner who had been sitting near the back all evening, stood up and started for the door without making eye contact with anyone. 3 other guests followed immediately. Then more. It was not a stampede. It was more orderly than that. It was the quiet, dignified exit of people who understood exactly what kind of event they had suddenly found themselves attending and who had personal brands and professional reputations they were not prepared to have photographed next to. Within 12 minutes, the restaurant was mostly empty. My mother-in-law was sitting at the head table she had arranged herself. Her posture was still perfect, which somehow made it worse. She was looking at her son, who was sitting on one of the bar stools with his head in his hands, the charcoal blazer I had picked out for him bunched up around his shoulders. Amber collected her coat from the hook near the entrance. She did it without drama, without a scene, with the brisk efficiency of a person closing a tab and leaving before it turns awkward. She opened the front door. She paused just long enough to look back at my husband. "I believed what you told me," she said. "That was my mistake." She said it without cruelty, which was worse somehow than if she had been cruel about it. Then she walked out into the February night, and the door swung shut quietly behind her. His mother turned to him. Whatever she had been holding in throughout the evening was working its way to the surface now. "I could see it the way you see a storm changing the color of the sky." "The credit line," she said. He lifted his head. His eyes were red at the rims. "I was going to tell you," he said. "I just needed the acquisition to close first. It was 30 days, maybe 45. I had the numbers. It was going to work." "You put my name on a debt without my knowledge?" she said. Her voice was doing something I had never heard it do in 4 years. It was losing its certainty, not into softness, into something sharper. "You used my name, my credit, my financial history, which I have spent my entire life protecting, so that you could serve small plates in a room your wife actually owns." She picked up her handbag from the table, set it back down, picked it up again. "I gave up 14 months of my life managing this family's reaction to your decisions," she said. "I drove to her firm's Christmas party to size up her colleagues. I told you she was not the right fit because I believed it. I believed in you. I told everyone I knew that you were building something extraordinary." She stood up. "You made me look like a fool in front of everyone I know," she said. "And now I am going to spend the next however many months explaining to a creditor why my son used my signature on a $250,000 loan I knew nothing about." She looked at me, just once, directly. It was not an apology. It was something more honest than an apology. It was the look of a woman recognizing, too late, that she had bet on the wrong side of a wall. Then she walked out. My husband was alone in his restaurant. I stood near the entrance and let the quiet sit for a moment. Claire was behind me, organizing her files. The bartender was in the back somewhere, moving glasses. The lights were still on, warm and amber over the reclaimed wood tables, and the place looked exactly like what I had always known it could look like. Beautiful, considered, exactly the vision I had believed in enough to stake $500,000 on. I pulled my coat tighter and looked at him. "I loved this place," I said. "I want you to know that. I loved it from the napkin sketches. I believed in every single part of it, including you." He did not look up. "I am not doing this because I hate you," I said. "I am doing this because you took something I gave you in good faith and you handed pieces of it to people who had no idea what it cost me to build it. And then you stood in this room tonight without me and called it yours." He finally looked up. His eyes were wet. He looked, for the first time in a long time, like the person I had married in that small outdoor ceremony in Centennial Park, the person who had been so certain and so alive with his own ideas and who had somehow, over 4 years, replaced certainty with entitlement and not noticed the difference. I did not wait for him to say anything. I had learned, after a long time, that waiting for the right words from the wrong person was a way of volunteering to be disappointed. I turned and walked out of Ember and Oak. 6 months later, the dissolution was finalized. The restaurant assets were liquidated to cover the outstanding lien. The bar inventory and custom equipment were sold to a hospitality group in Knoxville that had been interested in the small wares from the beginning. My husband accepted a settlement that discharged the personal debt between us in exchange for a full waiver of any claim to the business entity. His attorney had advised him, correctly, that contesting my ownership of Ridgeline Creative Properties would cost more than it could possibly recover. He was currently working as a sous chef at a hotel restaurant in Chattanooga. I knew this because his mother had called me once, 3 months after the dissolution closed, ostensibly to say that she understood certain things differently now. It was not an apology in any meaningful sense, but it was more than I had expected from her, and I received it the way I had learned to receive most things from that family, without expectation, without warmth, and with enough distance to keep myself intact. The line of credit came back to haunt them both exactly as Claire had predicted. The bank moved to collect on the secondary guarantor when my husband defaulted on the first 2 payments. His mother had to liquidate a significant portion of her investment portfolio to cover the exposure. She did not lose her house, but she lost a great deal of the certainty that had always made her so difficult to be around. I stood in the empty space on a morning in late August. The restaurant had been cleared out for 2 months. The floors were still beautiful. The natural light still came through the south-facing windows the way I remembered it from the afternoon I had walked through the empty shell of the building and told my husband that this was the one. My business partner, a women's wellness entrepreneur named Dana, who had been looking for a flagship location in East Nashville for 3 years, stood beside me with a floor plan rolled under her arm. "We can keep the bar footprint for the juice and supplement bar," she said. "The back kitchen is already up to code. We would need to reconfigure the dining area for the movement studio, but the square footage works perfectly." I looked around the room. The walls where his framed reviews had hung, the corner where the jazz quartet had been set up, the spot near the entrance where I had stood in my coat and watched his entire constructed world come apart around him. "Let's do it," I said. The wellness studio opened on a Tuesday in October, exactly 1 year after the original restaurant soft launch. I was there for every minute of it. The first few months were imperfect in the way that first months always are. There were vendor miscommunications and a scheduling system that crashed twice and a plumbing issue in the movement studio that cost more to fix than the original estimate. None of it felt like failure. All of it felt like exactly what I had been doing for years, solving problems in a space that actually belonged to me. By the end of the first quarter, we were booked 3 weeks out for private sessions and had secured a corporate wellness contract with 2 downtown firms. Dana brought in a nutritional counselor and a licensed therapist who ran a weekly group session that filled within 48 hours of going live on the website. We were nowhere near our 2-year projections and ahead of everything we had hoped for in month 1. I was sitting at my desk in the small office I had built from what used to be the restaurant's wine storage room when my phone buzzed with a banking notification. A direct deposit to Ridgeline Creative Properties from a Tennessee judgment enforcement order. My ex-husband's first wage garnishment had cleared. It was not a large number. His salary in Chattanooga was modest, and the garnishment was structured as a percentage rather than a flat amount, because Claire had argued, correctly, that a flat amount would create undue hardship and give him grounds to appeal. The percentage was patient. The percentage would continue for a long time. I set the phone down and looked out the window at the East Nashville street. The early October light was the same color it had been a year ago, warm and slanted and amber, the kind of light that made everything look like it was about to become something. I thought about all the versions of this story I had told myself in the months before the grand opening, the versions where I confronted him privately, where I accepted the settlement offer Claire had discouraged me from taking, where I cried in his mother's driveway and asked her why she had done what she did as though the answer would give me something I needed. I thought about the version where I stayed in the hospital after the appendix surgery and decided that a man who visited once for 40 minutes and sent a photo was still worth fighting for. I did not stay in any of those stories long. The hard thing that no one tells you about rebuilding yourself after someone dismantles you is that the rebuilding does not feel like reclaiming something you lost. It feels like finding out what you were actually made of the whole time. Materials you did not know you had, that only become visible under a certain kind of pressure. He wanted a restaurant with his name above the door, and a story where he was the visionary. He got my money to build it, my labor to shape it, and my legal architecture to own it, and he used all three of those things while writing me out of the narrative entirely. The only miscalculation was that I read the fine print. I cannot tell you that financial independence solves grief. It does not. I grieved the marriage with the whole weight of what it had been before it became what it ended as. I grieved the version of him I had believed in. I grieved the Thanksgiving dinners and the Sunday mornings, and the trip we took to Charleston the first year we were married, where we ate oysters at a waterfront restaurant and talked until midnight about everything we were going to build together. What I can tell you is this. The contracts you sign are not the opposite of love. They are not cynicism dressed up as caution. They are the practical evidence that you understand your own worth well enough to put it in writing. The woman who funded her husband's dream in good faith and the woman who enforced her legal rights in that restaurant are not two different people with two different values. They are the same woman at two different stages of the same understanding. Protect what you build. Document what you contribute. Never let anyone convince you that asking for the paperwork is the same as not trusting the person you love. And if they build an empire on your foundation and forget to invite you to the celebration, make sure you own the building. If this story meant something to you, please subscribe to Restoration Stories. There is more where this came from, and every single one of them ends with the woman still standing.